I don't know where to begin. I have been through quite a lot in the last few months, and actually the last couple of years. In this video, I kind of wanted to address where I've been and probably what's going to be the focus of this video. This video is going to be a bit different than everything else I've ever put on my channel. I wanted to kind of address where I've been and some of the things I've been going through the last couple of months and some realizations I've had about myself in the last couple of years. So for those of you who see me regularly on my community tab in YouTube, people I interact with on social media like Instagram, and frankly just people I end up talking to in person, it's been very difficult for me realizing that I'm almost certainly autistic. And it at first felt like a huge relief that maybe this explains a lot of the difficulties I've been through in my life. I've always felt that I was walking around with a giant kick me sign on my back, and the amount of bullying I had to withstand felt inordinately high compared to other people that I knew, I was friends with. I always felt like an outsider, and it was difficult just accepting that, well, maybe I'm just being weird and I should be more normal. I don't know what normal is. I really don't. I only know me and how little I actually fit in the world. So it's kind of been a bit of a roller coaster trying to understand what autism is, how it can present in a variety of ways, feeling like I don't have the authority to apply any label to myself, at least not until I felt I had sufficiently understood what autism could be. And I've realized that actually spending that long anticipating some great big revelation, I've actually approached this whole thing like an autistic person would, spending many hours researching, combing through information, going through all of my life experiences, taking other people's testimonials and putting everything into perspective, and then looking at everything, coalescing all this information, and then still feeling like, despite how accurately everything I've researched to date has been almost as if other people's lives were mine, and still not feeling quite comfortable believing that I had any authority to even self-diagnose. Like, what am I doing to the community of people who have an official diagnosis? Or what if I'm wrong? And these are all sort of things that I grappled with in 2022. So I was first put on this path in early to mid 2021, and it was kind of brought on through misunderstanding some things about life. It sounds kind of obvious when I say it, but essentially I didn't understand why my partner couldn't just do the dishes. It was a chore, we all make dishes, we don't have a dishwasher, so everything has to be done by hand. And I went through many things considering, oh, maybe it's just that he didn't have to do as much in the way of chores when he was younger, than I did, and maybe it's me not understanding how his childhood and the things that his parents might have expected him to do might mean that, well, that's the disconnect. He didn't have my upbringing, which could have been different. I was an only child. How am I supposed to know? And I was initially dismissive of some of the things that he said about ADHD. And the more I sought to understand him and trying to understand ways of communicating or phrasing something so that he could understand my request, it sometimes left me feeling flabbergasted. And that's not even a really great way to describe the feeling. It was just, I thought I was miscommunicating horribly and I didn't know how to do better. As it turns out, the friend who set me on this path was diagnosed autistic and essentially put a list of "have you ever" in front of me, and I was surprised actually at how many things I aligned with. So it's what led me to accept that it wasn't laziness, it wasn't defiance, it wasn't anything negative that prevented my partner from being able to listen to me or just carry out a request. It was legitimately because there were issues with the way I was presenting my information to him that he kind of understood, but he didn't understand in a way that made sense to him. Like, he lacked that thread that that kind of joined these ideas together that I was trying to convey to him. And the second I started changing how I approached asking him to do something and writing things down and reinforcing and allowing him the opportunity to procrastinate because it was something he didn't want to do, and the benefit I got was the second I started communicating him in ways that he resonated with, it gave him a lot more agency over how he used his time, how he organized when he was going to do a chore, and ever since, it's greatly improved our life. Funny that. But I never in my wildest dreams would have thought that I might be neurodivergent, and specifically autistic. So once we kind of established new ways of communicating, how to do these things in our lives, he understood where I was coming from, that I was just trying to ask him to help me because I needed something done and I felt like I was always doing things, and then realizing that he just needed different framing references to understand what I needed. And while that was resolved, I was then contending with, well, what does ADHD look like? What does autism look like in terms of symptoms, in terms of activities, behaviors? And I kind of went back and forth thinking, maybe I'm also ADHD, but I didn't quite feel like I aligned with the characteristics. And it was because of this initial feeling like this sort of sounds like me. My friend suggested, have you considered maybe being autistic? And after almost a year of reading, and I mean obsessively reading and watching and going through those little tests that you can fill out online, that I started to come to the conclusion that I think I'm actually autistic. And I didn't know then how to apply it to my life. In case you're wondering, I am sitting on the floor because I hate being restricted to one sitting position, and I've realized that I've always been this way. I like to be in lots of different kinds of orientations. Like I like to lay on my stomach on the floor, and sometimes I like to just pull up my feet on the couch. I've always just oriented my body in ways that aren't very ladylike or improper in some way. But I find it helps me kind of cope with the discomfort of doing something or maintaining my attention on something which might not necessarily be of complete interest to me. I mean, I think if I was given the choice to sit in a variety of ways at school, I probably would have done more to pay attention. As I said, I didn't know really how to apply an autistic view to my lifestyle. So one of the main reasons why I've kind of flown under the radar is I'm a girl, a woman born in the 80s, and that was at a time when diagnosis was mainly interested in boys. I didn't have anything that really stood out. I seemed quite bright, and that's sort of part of when my masking really took effect, when I was told how to behave, how to be a girl, why can't you be more like this or like that. Use this child as a model. I remember modeling my behavior in an active way at the age of like 5 or 6. And when you start masking that early, it becomes part of you. No matter how much of a struggle it may feel to keep that facade up at all times, it was so heavily reinforced that I do it somewhat naturally. So whenever I've had particular failings, like in school, for example, or with friends, I just thought, I'm the problem. I need to adapt to what the expectations are. I can't just be me. I have to be this, other version of me. And when I was in the presence of girls, especially, who were already this type, I knew I couldn't compete against that type because people would inevitably see that this girl is definitely not this type. Why, what is wrong with them? And I believed that that was why I was being bullied so much. So I kind of took a different approach and decided, well, if I'm around girls that are like A, I'm just going to be like girl B. And it kind of worked. My weirdness or my differences didn't seem quite out of the ordinary. I just modeled myself to be that different and hoped that it would be socially acceptable. It worked, but behind the scenes, I was constantly struggling, and I was struggling in ways that I actually could not cope with. And there are far too many things that I had to experience that I won't go into here, but essentially, I was always trying to be somebody I wasn't, and when I did too much, which is always the case, that mask, that facade, that veil would fall away, and I would be myself. But I wouldn't be quirky and fun and able to engage in special interests in the way that felt good for me. It was always me being so overburdened and neurologically dysregulated that I would have massive temper tantrum style meltdowns. It's not a great feeling, especially when I was 14, 15 years old experiencing this and being told this is not how a young adult behaves. That no matter how awful I felt and how good it felt to just be emotional about something, I wasn't really allowed to be. And so I just got into a habit of constantly suppressing everything. And yeah, it's actually not healthy. Who would have thought? It's not healthy. When I first started filming in Korea, I had a couple of goals. One, I couldn't really perform my business in the way I had before because shipping from Korea was going to be way too expensive. Getting wool there was really, really hard. And I needed an outlet that was so creative, something that allowed me to maintain some kind of connection to the fiber arts community. So because I hadn't had time to create any videos for Expertly Dyed for tutorials when I was in America, because I was working full-time, running Expertly Dyed part-time, and teaching martial arts part-time, I didn't have a lot of downtime, if you get what I mean. So I had played around with some things, like I did a few trial videos and started editing them, but I wasn't happy with the results. It felt very stiff and it wasn't coming together the way I wanted it to. So I just shelved the idea. And then when I was in Korea, I realized actually this is really important to me. I want to put good educational content out there. I want it to be accessible. I want people who, maybe like me, want to learn how to do something, but there's never a teacher available. And sometimes teaching, it's a skill. You know, some people will explain things to me and I won't understand it. But the second you start showing me, the second that you put lots of things into perspective, I get it. And the more that I'm able to repeat it, the better I am at mimicking. And I will do this until I actually get full comprehension. It's a delayed thing. If you're autistic or neurodivergent or have any kind of similarities with those learning difficulties, will understand and appreciate where I'm coming from here. I did a lot of figure skating when I was a kid. A lot of it was just practice, repetition, try it like this, feel this in your body when you're doing that. It helped. And then when I did martial arts, it was visual, it was embodied, I was actually doing all the motions. I could incorporate the verbal commands with the haptic, the sense, like all the sensory components, and I got really good at it. When I watched other people back in the very early days of YouTube, sort of 2010, I think YouTube came out in 2006, or maybe they started in 2005 or thereabouts, but it was sort of a place where you put videos to go viral, not really as an educational source. So I struggled to find good tutorial content to help me where I felt like my skills were lacking. And I often didn't have time to go to the spinning and weaving guilds, so I did occasionally go on Tuesdays when they had the meetings. But it was challenging because I was so busy otherwise, and when Expertly Dyed got, you know, more financially stable, I couldn't justify going, because if I did, I'd be dyeing wool at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning and then have to get up and go to work, my full-time job, the next day. So it was kind of a kindness to just stay at home and do these things, but it meant that accessing good taught content on the internet was not really possible. So when I had this opportunity to explore the filming or the tutorial side of Expertly Dyed, it was a really easy decision. So I went ahead, jumped in, got started. Those tutorials are still online and people still watch them. I endeavored to make high quality content that was educational, that showed as much as possible. I describe how to position the body, if something starts to hurt, or even troubleshooting. My video on troubleshooting my Kromsky wheel, it's still one of my most popular videos, despite it being like 12 years old. because a lot of people need that access to, you know, a very specific topic. And that's really what I wanted to address, is not just how to make something, but when things go wrong. It was my experience in life that a lot of things go wrong, and in order to continue putting out a very polished product or to develop my expertise in something, I still wanted to get a PhD. I accounted for as many things that could go wrong and how to deal with them, and I put that out on the internet because I wanted other people who had similar frustrations, or they had seen someone make something but they're like, but that's when it goes well. What happens in my situation where the yarn just suddenly doesn't want to go onto the wheel? I put that out there for me, but also for everyone else who has been in that situation like me, regardless of who they are. They could be perfectly neurotypical and immediately understand. But for those who don't, that kind of content really resonates. When I first started filming, my partner at the time was shocked at my behavior. He obviously knew me really well before I had started filming, and the second a camera was in front of me, the second it was rolling, I was a completely different person. He did not understand that I was masking. I did not understand that I was masking, but I had understood what was expected of this kind of context, how I should look, how I should act, how I should speak, and I doubled down on that as a performance. And I still love talking in front of a camera. I like communicating with others who have similar interests, because I feel like those shared experiences are one of the things that really helps develop community. And it's something that I feel I've always been ostracized from having. So after I filmed my very first official video, he looked at me and he said, "You know, you're a completely different person when you're being filmed." And I said, yeah, because it's in part an act. I want to be seen as enthusiastic about learning and communicating information and all that stuff. And I didn't really see this as a bad thing. It can be seen as a bad thing. Just because I put up a facade that I seem overly charismatic and enthusiastic, it isn't farce. It is coming from a genuine place. I really do love teaching. I love sharing everything I know. And I like doing it for free. There have been people over the years who have told me, well, you're undermining the whole teaching of hand spinning because they won't come to me if you're offering it for free. And while I completely understand that, I would rather see the community access information like being able to spin, being able to knit, or any other things that I feel are sort of encapsulated by that whole entry level. Because the more we restrict behind paywalls, the less we're doing to keep the slice alive. And by what I mean is, I might overperform in my teaching, but I do it because I feel like contributing helps grow the community. And if it's free, more people can join the community. It's more accessible, it's more inclusive, it's irrespective of where you are. Because it's a visual thing, you can see it without even needing to have me speak English or a different language. You can just see it. I feel like by cultivating that connection, I'm upholding values that are actually really important to me because of the childhood that I had, because of all the times I wasn't included, for all the times I was completely misunderstood, or someone just didn't understand that I had a learning disability, and explaining it verbally to me over and over was pointless because I was never going to remember it. I don't want others who want to learn how to do this be put into the same situation as me. So, in a sense, I feel like my particular frustrations and experience in life are the main motivating reasons why I put content out on the internet for free. At the end of the day, it's not really about me. I would love for this to be a great way to make a full-time living. So for everyone who has watched my videos and taken whatever learning I have been able to deliver to them, harnessed it, made it better, can do, whatever it is in their communities better because of me, I feel like I've done my job. Going from here, what's next? One of the things that I'm keen to start doing is unmasking in my life. I understand that constantly masking means that I don't express when things are frustrating. I don't kind of get the anxiety out of my system. I ignore how I feel. I don't want to keep pretending when things are okay. A lot of things in my life are very hard. I have accomplished quite a lot with what turns out to be quite a disadvantage, and it comes with battle scars. I keep experiencing the same things repeatedly with employers not understanding me, misinterpreting me, infantilizing me. There are lots and lots of ways to treat humans, and for whatever reason, because there are neurodivergent people out there who are a little bit different, it's like carte blanche to just treat those individuals however, because they're so different. Like, why can't they be normal? I literally don't know what is wrong with people sometimes. I would never behave this way. People are just different. I've always accepted that there are people out there who are different. I love whenever I get to go to a fiber show. I meet so many great people. I see so many beautiful things. I get a little bit of imposter syndrome looking at my stuff versus everyone else's. I love promoting everyone else's work because they've come up with something that I didn't, and how they have sort of taken all of their, views of aesthetic and everything, and they've boiled it down into a product or like a just anything. And it's just so nice to see the diversity. There's so much, and not any one person can do it all. Like, that's what makes this community thrive. Moments in my past when I have interacted with people who were classified as different, that had something about them, possibly neurological, that just made them different, or people who had physical disabilities and the world was unkind to them, I resonated with it. And I didn't know at the time why I felt this connection, because sometimes it scared me, like why do I feel this? But I understand now that the reason why is because I was also different. Occasionally, I don't like researching everything before I start talking about something, because I feel that occasionally it is really good to see how I personally adapt to something. I'll probably talk about this in another video, maybe, I don't know. Sometimes I get so caught up in needing to be perfect, and that's been socially reinforced beyond my control, that it's always my go-to. I generally don't put any information out there that I feel I couldn't substantially back up, because I can give myself some authority to just experiment, just see what happens. Having that dialectical exchange with a fiber I've never used, like flax. I mean, I had seen videos, I'd watched demonstrations, I've had people tell me repeatedly, I also researched over the years. But when I actually did my live stream to spin, I was working with acquired knowledge from like 10 years. It wasn't anything that I had done fresh. It wasn't as though I had just watched a whole bunch of tutorials. It was sort of, this is what I've seen people do in the last 10 years of accumulating information on the subject. I really wanted to see what I could learn about the fiber, about myself, about the transferable elements of these skills that we have. And I actually learned a lot about the process, and I will verbalize whenever I'm not really well researched on something, because that's not really the point. You don't always have to be super researched on something in order to sit down and show somebody, well, this is what I'm going to do. That process is equally important, because if you're only ever filming tutorials, if you're only putting tutorials out there, some elements of the learning process, how you adapt, is not visible. And I feel like that is something that we all do innately, but it's never really focused on as an important element of how we learn, how we adapt, how we use applied critical thinking from stuff we've learned over the course of however long our lives are and how many experiences we've had. So I think by foregrounding that, hey, this isn't a tutorial, but I'm going to show you how I'm working through this process of taking what I've learned and applying it to something new. That's the first thing, is you will hands down be guaranteed to have high quality content from me. What's the second thing? I need to stop being quite so perfectionist. It is okay to put out content because I have thoughts about something. I often will react to things that I hear. AI is a perfect example. Last night, while knitting, and I watched an episode put out by Jazza, who is a YouTuber who does really great art content on YouTube, and I love his approach to everything. He's actually diagnosed ADHD. He has a fluidity to the way that he approaches his work that I struggle with. And it's not because I can't do it that I won't be able to do it. In fact, the word struggle can be very temporary. I did not have the opportunity to just play around or experiment or just see how I felt about something. It was always, I have one and one only opportunity to do this perfectly. Jazza ended up talking about AI, and there's actually some pros and cons to AI, and it's not going to be a very straightforward process understanding and integrating AI. But I really think it's an interesting phenomenon that as a society we haven't really quite dealt with yet. Like, we're still kind of processing what it can do and how people are harnessing this, which, as a side note, part of the reason why I've left Etsy is the incredible amount of AI flooding that market. It's not really handmade, and there's the drop shipping element, which means that it's very easy to flood the Etsy market with that. But anyway, And he expressed some difficulty with fully embracing it, fully rejecting it, being in this gray area in between, because there are really good arguments on either side, and ones where actually not having AI could be a con for some people in terms of accessibility, for small businesses wanting to actualize some of their concepts but not really having any artistic skills to show an actual artist what they want. That can be quite limiting for small businesses, and small businesses help with the economy thrive. So, you know, there's lots of back and forth. AI is really bad because of the computational efforts involved and how that impacts the environment. There's a lot of things that I end up wanting to comment on, but I feel restricted because I'm not the authority. I haven't really done much research on this, or I don't know what my opinion is. Actually, I don't really think it matters quite as much as I have led myself to believe. And I think that's one of the things that makes the perfectionist attitude that I have held my entire life kind of toxic. I often hold myself to an unrealistic standard that I don't hold others to. And I realize that that is trauma-based. So I felt like because no one really understood me, and the only way I was going to get heard is if I was just perfect or just really good at things. And I actually inadvertently, without realizing it, put a lot of aids in place for myself to facilitate my own learning. I sat down and I taught myself enough physics to be able to discuss my experiment in my first master's degree to my reviewers. And then I did it again when I wrote my PhD. I didn't think I was going to need it again. Sat down, I had to teach myself some more physics. And so it was that sort of anticipating my own needs and giving myself ample time and planning and incorporating my learning aids so that I could achieve what my goal was. You know, the most recent example with spindle whorls for my PhD, I had to sit down and learn that physics. I also had to make sure that I actually understood it and it wasn't just me mimicking the knowledge. It was actually demonstrating that I understood it. And then I also had to apply it to a data set, and then I had to interpret the results. It was a lot of things that I had to learn how to do. I was actually very effective at doing this because I had had 20-something years, 25 years at least, doing this for myself. So I could anticipate my learning needs. I could put all that stuff into place. But I also know for a fact that I have said these words. I don't hold others to the same level of perfectionism that I hold myself, because I recognize that it is toxic for me, and this was long before I even thought it was autism related. But I recognize that the insane standards that I kept myself to, and I consistently held myself to, should not apply to everyone. It is fine if it's a choice, but I have never wanted anyone to feel obligated to perform in the same kind of way I force myself to perform. I'm very open to people not learning how to do something very quickly. I am very patient when people need more opportunities to repeat something. I understand that sometimes you have physical limitations, and when I taught martial arts, that kind of thing happens. And so if you were very, very uncoordinated when you started teaching or learning martial arts, and I saw you progress in your physical coordination throughout your white belt, it was a very easy thing for me to see how you were when you started, how you are now, and whether you knew the curriculum, the important part. Then I could see you are clearly learning, you are better, but maybe their aptitude with that sort of part of the curriculum might not be as extensive as someone else's. But those are sort of innate or natural proclivities that they might have. That might be something that's not within their control. But the point is that they showed development, and that was what was important to me as an instructor. And again, looking back at it now, I was putting in place aids and understanding for other people's needs well before I understood that there could be differences in the way neurodivergent people learn. But whether people I'm teaching are neurodivergent, there are loads of others out there that have learning disabilities of all sorts, that have physical limitations just because genetics. But I was able to accommodate them. But I've not been doing this for myself. That's a really tough thing for me to bear, is realizing I've not been very kind to myself, and the lack of kindness to myself actually has massive ramifications on everything else in my life. In the last 3 months, I've been grappling with how autism is negatively perceived in the workplace, and some of the challenges associated with trying to get someone to understand that this is why you're different, why you need to be shown this thing that everyone assumes you should know again and again, or why asking questions isn't necessarily a bad thing. It has manifested in me an extreme amount of overwhelm, to the point where I have regularly been so neurologically dysregulated that I feel constantly queasy. I feel ill. My skin crawls. I cannot stand the feeling of a shirt against my skin. Or worse, when my partner gets into the bed with me, the shaking sensation of the bed, just getting into the bed, just laying in bed, and then he gets in next to me and the bed shakes and I can't. It makes me immediately queasy because I'm so overwhelmed with all of the misunderstandings, all of the pressures, all of the particular issues that when lined up actually become so overwhelming that it's difficult to kind of work through it. And I feel like I've just kind of worked myself into a bit of a corner, and it's not really my fault or my doing. Believe me, I would rather this never be the case. But it has meant that because I'm regularly perceived as being odd or too perfectionist or rigid or a simpleton, that one has come up quite a lot since the age of 16. I'm none of these things. I'm actually a deep thinker. When you allow me to focus, I'm able to perform in ways that most other people can't. I'm actually really effective at working only about 25 hours a week, and I can put forth more with less because I would have the time to put in learning aids for myself. Or when I was doing my PhD, I kept being told you should be considering this like a full-time job, and I was always reprimanding myself for not having put in the 40 hours. But the end result was I still managed to pull off a pretty well-respected PhD, advancing and innovating at the same time, publishing a lot, delivering many conference papers, putting together an experimental program just to understand textiles a little better. It was because I was able to focus. I was able to harness that part of my brain that I can just do it. I can focus until it's done. And when it's done, it's usually of a high quality. It's usually innovative, it's usually collating many disparate ideas together, finding those unique bits that tie it all into one idea. Convincing the world that you can do 40 hours of work in 25, it's impossible. It's really no wonder that a lot of neurodivergent people tend to be unemployed or part-time employees. Self-employed is a really common one. I need to stop holding myself to a standard that I wouldn't hold others to. I need to hold myself to the same standard that I make available for others, which is, it's okay if it takes longer. It's okay if it's not perfect. It's okay if you want to completely ignore the directions and do your own little thing. Because I think that's where a lot of creativity and stimulation comes from. I think that's where we get a lot of innovative ideas. It's fine to establish individuality in these ways. I want to put out more varied content, and I'm probably going to put it out maybe as an idea post, or I don't know what I'll call it. I'll think about that. Maybe I'll just call it a podcast. Everyone's got a podcast these days. So it'll be the Expertly Died podcast, where I just ramble about some ideas, some thoughts that I have, without feeling any anxiety that maybe I don't understand something, and I'm putting it out there as if, this is my understanding about AI and how I think this is detrimental to this or whatever, because I want to have points of discussion. I think perfectionism has stopped me from having a healthy discussion about anything. And because I enjoy talking about things I'm passionate about, I don't know where I was going with this. I'm a little bit disjointed at the moment. But essentially, I want to give myself more freedom to discuss things when I don't necessarily have to be the end-all authority on something, where I'm trying to talk about maybe peripheral things that have potentially an impact on some of the stuff that I do or we do. And yeah, so it could just be that we call it the Expertly Died podcast. And then we won't, have to worry about being interrupted by my cat Layla, who has now escorted herself into my craft room despite having the door closed earlier. I think this post has been a bit rambly, and that's okay. I've gone through a lot of learning and understanding what it means to be autistic, why I spent my entire life masking, how difficult it is to unmask, how badly it can be perceived if you are just being more authentically yourself, and that, perhaps I just need a very different or radical view of how I approach my life. Things haven't worked for many, many years, and it's always boiled down to the same issue, which is I'm different. I will always be different. I will always have learning difficulties. I will always want to be involved in things I'm passionate about. And I need to have an outlet that allows me to really express it as me, not just, hey everyone! In fact, I'm surprised that I haven't broken down into tears yet, because I had been wanting to put this video together for at least a month, and I'm only now doing it. There have been a lot of barriers preventing me, and when I started filming, I was gonna cry, but I think just talking about it and getting it out there has been very therapeutic for me. So I hope that you've at least understood more about me, where I come from, what to expect from me and my channel, why I've had this barrier, why I just go into these shutdown modes where I just immediately disappear from social media. I want to put content out, but I feel like I can't because I have too much anxiety, or I'm too tired, or too burnt out, or too just angry and upset about inequality in the world. And this is the first step towards making my goals a reality, making what I want to do actually manifested. So if you resonated with this video, I appreciate it. I feel great being seen. If this does resonate with you and the things that I have said makes you feel validated and seen, great. If this is all kind of a novel concept that maybe you didn't understand that this is what motivated me to do the content that I make, then, you know, maybe it was just a good opportunity to have a bit of a heart-to-heart about what goes on behind the scenes. If you would like, please subscribe if you haven't already. Give this video a thumbs up. I also have a Patreon where I have put some things about autism, and some of this background has actually been put in some of the posts there. Because Etsy is no longer a viable option for me, I would really appreciate it that if you want to spend £3 a month to support me as a creator, please check it out. It's mainly posts at this moment, but I'm hoping to reconsider options in the future with the various levels of contributions. There's also my website, exploitdiet.com, as much as I have wanted Etsy to be a consistent thing for me. So yes, if there's anything on my website that is of interest to you, feel free to take a gander at it at least. I would like to start making blog posts. There's a lot of things that I always want to keep doing, but there are many, many roadblocks in my life that have stopped that from happening. And it's not always a matter of, well, I'll carve out some more time, or I'll just do this instead of that, or I'll actually just sit down and do it now instead of, you know, this chore or getting more sleep. I'm hoping going forward I'll be able to have a bit more balance now that I've been able to get this out of my system. But at any rate, I will see you in the next video. I have no idea when it will be. I have no idea when this one will be out. I will endeavor to get it edited as soon as possible, but I need to be kind to myself. The desire is there, but let's not maybe put a huge hanging deadline on me, huh? Why you gotta be so weird? You want it in here so badly. Hmm?